What's the word? What's the word? What's the word, man? It's plausible deniability. We back yet again. It's episode number 7. Off top, man, gotta let y'all know I appreciate all the feedback, man, all the love, all the comments that I've been getting. Messages, you know what I mean? The reposts, the retweets. Everybody sharing the pod, man. Much love to y'all. I really appreciate y'all more than y'all know. Definitely, you know, as well, the constructive criticism, just all the feedback that I've been getting has been a major help in figuring out the direction to take this platform, man. So, you know, I just want to shout y'all out. It really does mean a whole lot to me. Definitely people down in the comments, you know, letting me know the type of content that I've been putting out so far that they may not have been aware of, as well as different content that they want to see going forward, you know. I definitely take all of that into account, you know, so just keep the feedback coming. You know, if this is your first time checking us out, please feel free, go back, you know, peep another episode, just read the title, maybe read the description, maybe something you super interested in, maybe something that you know a whole lot about. Either way, go ahead, let me know how you feeling about the content down in the comments, you know, and if you know somebody that may agree with the content, go ahead and share it with them. If you know somebody that fully would disagree with the content I'm putting out, man, share it with them as well, man. I'm always down to have a friendly debate, right? That's how we learn. We conversate, you know. We can't be afraid of conflict with the opinions, you know, that we form. Man, definitely this episode, I don't know. We just gonna look at a couple things from around the internet. This may be a little bit different than the last couple episodes, but at the same time, it's not necessarily my opinion. You know, it's some different court cases, some different things that we gonna look at that I feel like have kind of shaped the society that we currently living in. So, man, me personally, I'll be the first to tell you, you know, I'm super opinionated, right? But at the same time, I really do like to pick subjects apart, you know, to look for the nuance in different subjects. I don't kind of just run with my first thought. You know, I may see a headline or a title of a video that's like super inflammatory, right? Something that's like, wow, that can't be true, or wow, you know, I really want to agree with that, you know. And as I look into things, you know, my first thought as I'm coming to different conclusions is kind of what conflicting evidence to this thing that I'm finding myself agreeing with. What's the conflicting evidence to this, right? Because in some cases, you know, I do my research, I do just a little bit of digging, you know, and I happen to change my mind before I form the opinion that I might have initially been coming to. A lot of times, and I've been this way, you know, for years, definitely over a decade, the opinions that I hold personally, and I guess specifically in relation to the laws and the regulations of this country, it's definitely some of them that's anecdotal, you know, that's personal to me. But at the same time, a lot of my opinions in that regard, they come from different court cases and the disposition of those court cases, right? Not necessarily the court proceedings themselves, but actually what ends up being the judgment at the end, what ends up happening and how that affects other court cases going forward. You know, a lot of how the judicial system in the United States is run is based off precedent, right? So it's like if we do this one thing here, another lawyer at another point in time in a similar situation will be able to use kind of these same arguments, these same talking points to kind of make a case and in hopes of getting the same outcome or a similar outcome. So first off, I want to ask y'all, man, what's y'all opinion? And let me know down in the comments, man, what's y'all opinion on what you're seeing on the screen right now, the Second Amendment of the United States of America, the Constitution, right? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I think if you spend any amount of time on the internet, on social media, that type of thing, you'll see a lot of conversation on both sides, people making all kind of different arguments about how they feel about this topic here. You know, I feel it's super important, but I just want to know, is this something that you think was just some amazing foresight of the founding fathers of this country? Or do you think, you know, this here, the Second Amendment, this is something that maybe in the world we live in today, the society we living in today, maybe it's something that it doesn't hold as much weight. Maybe it's something that needs to be ratified, that needs to be looked at again. You know, and as always, this is I'm not necessarily going to share my opinion on this topic right here. I just want to know what you all think, kind of get an idea, read the room a little bit, you know. I think we do tend to hear a lot of people in positions of power that argue that maybe this is something that you know, they might want to take a second look at. And at the same time, I think you if you talk to people on a, you know, one-to-one basis, you tend to see a lot of people, a lot of the general population that are kind of sticklers on this last part right here of the shall not be infringed part, right? And ultimately, what does that mean? You know, it's got to be super important. You know, you got to understand this is a document that had to be proofread a gang of times, a lot of effort, a lot of time. I'm sure a lot of money went into putting the Constitution together. You know, there's a reason that this is the Second Amendment right behind free speech, right? So yeah, I just want to do a little bit more digging and kind of look into some other things on top of this that I believe have kind of formed and shaped the regulations and the laws in this country. So I want to start off by asking, when you see the image on your screen here, kind of what does this mean to you? Is this something that you have a high level of faith in? You know what I mean? Is this something that you feel that, you know, people that take that oath, people that take that pledge to their local police department or whatever form of law enforcement they're involved in, do you feel like this is something that they stand by and kind of put their life on the line to defend? Or is it something that it might have been a little bit more impactful back in the day or in another time period? You know, it might have meant a little bit more to the people that we expect to kind of uphold this policy, this idea right here. And again, I'm just curious into the people checking me out, you know, what you all think about this. I look back on my childhood, on my early adolescence, right? And maybe about 5th or 6th grade, I can kind of remember just coming to the conclusion, you know, for a long time, I had a understanding of the word hypocrisy, right? As well as an understanding that, you know, we're all humans, right? Nobody is perfect. You know, there's people that have some of the best intentions and will find themselves in the wrong situation and making the wrong choice, that type of thing. And so I kind of just remember it being pushed on me, neighborhoods that I lived in and different communities I was a part of. It was kind of always something that the authority figures would, you know, I feel like they would use this. This would be kind of an initiation to get you to have some sort of reverence in authority figures, specifically police, right? And I remember, you know, shout out to all my 90s babies out there, my 90s and my 80s babies. Shout out to everybody who grew up watching wrestling back when it was WWF, before WWE and whatever it is that they got out there now. But yeah, I definitely would say, and maybe just about every generation is like this to a different extent. But I definitely would say I came from a rebellious generation where, you know, no matter what it was that they were trying, we didn't necessarily have that just automatic respect for authority figures, right? I could definitely say, you know, back in the days, I remember coming into contact with different forms of law enforcement. You know, some of them in the neighborhood, again, a lot of the neighborhoods I lived in were a melting pot, right? It was all kind of different backgrounds, different types of kids in the neighborhoods that I was in. But I remember noticing at an early age, you know, there were some police officers, some law enforcement officers that if you happen to be on your bike and it broke down, you know, a slip chain, something like that, you know, they would take time out of their shift to stop what they were doing and come help you. But I also remember others, again, from a young age, it seemed like would find enjoyment out of hassling the kids in the neighborhood, kind of independent of the complexion of most of the kids in the neighborhood. It was kind of just like a thing to do for certain officers to stop whatever, you know, semi-harmless fun we may have been having back in the days. You know, sometimes for good reason, but as well just kind of, I don't know, it never really made sense watching an officer hop out of a car with something like this painted on the side, right, to protect and serve, and proceed to do the complete opposite. I look back on different things like this right here, right, the DARE program. And if you went to public school, I'm sure at some point in time you were introduced to this through an officer coming to your school and kind of trying to let you know, hey man, doing drugs, drinking, that type of thing, maybe that's not the life that you want to live. But I also remember, I would say a majority of the people in my generation not necessarily taking programs like this seriously, and probably for all kind of different reasons, different things going on in everybody's household respectively. But at the same time, I remember the implementation of things like this disingenuous, right? You know, you would kind of notice the officers that would come to the school or the different staff members, you know, would be speaking on things that they maybe weren't as aware of as they would like you to believe, or you could kind of just see it was done in like an apathetic nature, you know what I mean? Where it's like, man, they, again, it was a lot of hypocrisy that was easily noticeable back in those days. You know what I mean? So I remember this being something that for me personally, and I would say with a lot of the kids in the schools that I went to, it didn't necessarily stick with us, you know, for better or for worse. All right, so fast forward to my high school years, right? Again, I grew up in areas where there were all kind of different students from different backgrounds. I was never the type of person that kind of just hung around one group of people. You know what I mean? I can't say that I was the most social person in the world, but at the same time, I would say I had like a medium to large group of friends at most of the different schools that I went to. But this one school in particular, you know, that I spent a couple years at in my high school years, I remember having this one Italian homie, right? And me and this dude, I don't know, just kind of a random thing. We seemed to have a bunch of different classes together for about 2 years of both of us being in high school. Both years we had maybe like 5 or 6 different classes that we were both in, right? And I remember a big part of our interaction with each other would be cracking jokes on each other. What I guess a lot of people by today's standards would consider racist jokes, right? And when I tell y'all this was my homie, like again, you know, we spent a lot of time, maybe not so much outside of school. We definitely hung out, played sports together outside of school, that type of thing. Went to a couple different parties together. There was always like a mutual acknowledgement of each other, kind of no matter what group of friends we happen to be around when we would see each other, you know. And just being an adolescent, but coming into my own manhood, that was something that I look back, I really appreciated, you know, having those different connections, right? But this dude in particular, right, I remember the jokes were really a main part of me and bro's friendship, at least during school hours, right? We would both end up in trouble at different times, being overheard, you know, by different staff members, that type of things. At one point, you know, there was something that he said this one day, you know, that got us both in a little bit of trouble. And then he did something that I would call a stand-up act where, you know, he kind of took the blame for the comment that he made, you know, and let the staff members know that me being a melanated individual, right, why should I be in trouble for a comment that he made? So again, these are kind of things that I look back on, especially in the society that we're in today. I would definitely say I don't see as much of that, you know, what I would call accountability, even to his detriment. But man, that was my dog, you know, for a large part of high school. That was my dog, you know, kind of the thing that we would do. I don't know, man. This dude had a lot of funny jokes, man, specifically about like the different style. Again, I was always in the rap. I was always in the hip hop, you know, so I did have a certain way that I dressed. A lot of the kids in the school that I went to, you know, it was a similar style of dress. It was the hip hop style, you know. Again, shout out to my 90s babies. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But it was funny. He would always just have jokes kind of mispronouncing the different brand names of the urban clothing lines, that type of things. And I would always have a comeback, you know, ready to go for him, just about the pampered lifestyle that he lived, experiences that he may have missed out on, that type of stuff, you know. But I do remember, in particular, we had a study hall together, and I spoke on this before. The study hall that a lot of the students had in this school was like an hour and 20 minutes, something like that. Very, very rarely would students actually be studying or doing any sort of homework or classwork in study hall, right? There was study hall was held in a library in this school in particular. All the students in the library, we would be spending time on the computer. This was the early YouTube days, you know. You would be in this long row of computers, and whether you playing video games or looking up different videos, you know, and again, we checking out YouTube. This was like the Wild West of YouTube, right? So this was like the days getting my first email account. Right, thing to do while you in study hall, you know, you may just get a random email from somebody shooting you a video or just something super crazy from around the world, something from the news, you know, what have you. If you go back, I think that was episode 5, we was talking about the biggest slime, right? So things of that nature, that stuff was like rampant on the internet back in those days. I remember my Italian homie from back then, he sent me some information at one point about several court cases. And I remember he and I kind of doing some deep dives into this, just looking at what it is that the police are actually employed to do, right? What and who, but again, specifically what the police are actually there to protect, who it is that they're there to serve, right? How police in certain situations would swerve around different duties. So first of all, we looking at just the basic Google search, right? Our police required to protect, you know, didn't even finish the sentence, but as you can see, what immediately pops up, and you also peep the people also ask section and the different things that pop up down here. But the first thing that we see from this personal injury law firm. It says courts have repeatedly ruled that their only duty is to serve the parties. What does that say right there? A government agency. Courts have repeatedly ruled that their only duty is to serve the parties' public safety interests that employ them. Police have zero constitutional duty to protect YOU. So I wonder how many of y'all have seen something like this before. And I'm sure, you know, a few of y'all, you check this out. You may come from a large LEO family, right? And you say, nah, that's got to be BS, right? That doesn't make sense. They got it painted on the side of the cars, right? This is what they're here for, or else why would they paint something like this on their cars? It's been 10 plus years that I've come across different statements like this, and what sticks out to me is that it's constitutional part, right? Also, this over my adult years and different employment situations that I've been in, I think it's kind of rare, especially in the society, you know, we currently live in. It's kind of rare that you see anybody in any sort of a career field that will go against the interests of those that employ them. We look in the people also ask section. Boom, this is from last year. Are police legally required to protect civilians? And this is Quora, you know what I mean? So I'm sure a percentage of you all watching this right now that'll say, well, that's not an honest source, you know what I mean? That's all opinion or whatever, you know what I mean? So just hold on, just rock with me for a minute. You know, we're gonna go a little bit deeper. But this person answered, you know, the police in the United States have a duty to protect the public, but they are not legally required to protect individual citizens. And so I would ask a lot of you out there watching, what's the difference between a police officer's duty and them being legally required to do something? Is there a difference in that? Is it true police don't have to protect you? And then we see the Supreme Court of the United States explain that it is a fundamental principle of American law that a government and its agents are under no general duty to provide public services such as police protection to any individual citizen. This says a lot right here if you really kind of read between the lines. So again, we look at a couple more just independent opinions, right? From these different websites. Police have no duty to protect you. Federal court affirms. The U.S. Supreme Court has made it clear that law enforcement agencies are not required to provide protection to the citizens who are forced to pay the police. FindLaw.com. Do the police have an obligation to protect you? It's from 2022, right? FindLaw examines what, if any, legal obligations police have to protect the public that they, protect and serve, right? Back to Quora, you know, it seems to be a bunch of people asking different variations of this same question. A question that I asked based on somebody that, you know, by today's standards, I'm not even supposed to get along with, you know, the Italian homie from back in the day. This is something that he brought to my attention back in high school. I remember some of the conversations that he and I had regarding this in different classes. Again, it got us both in trouble, and we both took that on the chin back in those days, right? Just trying to learn more about the world that we were both living in. So they asked, you know, are police officers legally obligated to protect citizens? Boom, they give you a straight answer. So again, I'm not a mind reader, but I know what some of y'all that's watching this are thinking. If you still here, you know what I mean? You may be thinking, you know, you pulling up some online stuff from Quora, from different social media websites. That's all opinion, right? So I wanted to bring y'all this. This is from a .gov website. This is from the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Justice Programs, right? So this is, I would say, pretty official. You dig? Title says domestic violence. When do police have a constitutional duty to protect? If you've ever come across any documents like this, go ahead, let me know down in the comment section, man. Maybe it's something that I missed from my years of research kind of on this specific topic, right? Says date published 1991. The journal this is from is the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin, January 1991. Okay, cool. It says annotation. This article discusses the extent to which police have a federal constitutional duty to protect citizens against domestic violence and the circumstances under which police can be held liable under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 for a breach of that duty. Just take a second. Take that in, right? This is speaking on the constitutional liability of the police for if they have to put themselves in harm's way to protect your average everyday tax-paying citizen. You dig? It says the article addresses section 1983 claims against the police based on an alleged violation of substantive due process, equal protection of the law, and procedural due process. The potential for liability based on these three federal constitutional claims is discussed in the context of recent court decisions involving suits against the police. The article concludes that as a general rule, the courts have determined that police do not have a constitutionally imposed duty to protect citizens against domestic violence. What does that mean to you, fam? You know, where I come from, a lot of my homies, a lot of the people in my life today, and that's 10, 20-year homies of mine. One thing that I can say, all the disagreements that we do have, one thing that I could say that most of the people in my life today, we all are on the same page about. Maybe the worst thing that you can do as a human being, but specifically as a male, is bring harm to a woman or a child. And again, that's something that that's the hill that I'm willing to die on, right? So when I see things like this on a government website, again, we scroll back up to the top, Office of Justice Programs. You can look this up yourself, right? You can look this journal up yourself, right? This is from the FBI, you dig? This is letting you know, as a general rule, the courts have determined that police do not have a constitutionally imposed duty. They're not required by law to protect any of the general population against domestic violence. So when we see images like this, right? How do you feel about this after seeing that last document that we just took a look at, right? And some of those other questions that we were looking at previously. Is it possible that this is something that it's kind of just put there to make you feel a certain way, and there may be less substance behind it than you originally believed? Now I want y'all to check this out. I feel like my man right here, he makes a very clear and concise breakdown of this initial point that I'm trying to get to.
Strange as it may seem, the police have zero duty to protect you from robbers, rioters, or criminals. The U.S. Supreme Court has made it clear that law enforcement agencies are not required to provide protection to citizens who are forced to pay the police for their services. In the cases of Descheny versus Winnebago and the town of Castle Rock versus Gonzales, the Supreme Court has ruled that the police agencies are not obligated to provide protection to citizens. Neither the Constitution nor state law impose a general duty upon police officers or government officials to protect individual persons from harm, even when they know harm will occur. So police can watch someone attack you, refuse to intervene, and not violate your constitutional rights. In other words, police are well within their rights to pick and choose when to intervene to protect the lives and property of others, even when a threat is apparent. In both of these court cases above, clear and repeated threats were made against the safety of children, but government agencies chose to take no action.
So again, when you hear information like that, I just want to know, and y'all let me know down in the comments, what's your thoughts on that? You know, we're talking less about the opinion of myself or the gentleman in this video here. We're talking about multiple constitutional rulings. In recent history, we think about situations, extremely tragic situations, right? Like the shooting at the elementary school down in Texas. And just taking an idea like this into account, I would say it kind of makes it make a little bit more sense why we saw the police react the way that we did in that particular situation, doing things like holding armed parents back from going in and protecting their own children, detaining parents that were that made their way to the scene of again, a huge tragedy where the lives of children were threatened. Police on the scene detained parents from going in and attempting to put an end to that tragedy before it got as bad as it did, while, you know, simultaneously the police not doing what I think most of us view their duty as, them being the ones to go charging in, and with all their training, the militarization that we see these days, this society that we live in now. You know, I think the expectation of the general public is maybe not for them to go in guns blazing, but all the taxpayer funds that the police take in. I think it's a fair assumption by most people that when a time comes, you're taking that job with an expectation to do whatever it takes to diffuse a situation before lives are lost, right? Just again, understanding a concept like this is very important for your own personal well-being, for your own safety and the safety of those around you. Like, again, what does this mean? And what do they mean by a well-regulated militia? Because that doesn't say police force. It says a militia is necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Furthermore,
so let's check out
you cannot sue the police
a little bit more of this video here.
Refusing to send help or to make an arrest, even if you are required to submit a government monopoly on force and to pay these police agency taxes. Police discretion to stand by is not absolute. For example, police have a duty to protect those whom they have a special relationship, such as a prisoner.
So also, and I think I brought this up in one or two of my previous videos, when we look at people who are SOs, you know, and you'll just have to kind of use your brain, think critically on what I mean by that. Certain types of offenders, right? SOs. And those people that, you know, you say, well, just send them to jail, because when they get to where they're going, they're going to have a hard time. They're going to really get what they deserve, right? I feel like it's my duty. I have to let you all know. And again, this is anecdotal, but my experience, the very short time that I spent dealing with the criminal justice system, the only time that I can say I personally saw law enforcement put themselves in harm's way in those different institutions I was in was to protect those certain types of offenders, right? People that committed offenses and were convicted of offenses against women and children. That's the only time that I saw the police go out of their way and again put themselves in harm's way, was defending those type of people.
Even if police did have a duty to protect you, how can a total of approximately
I just want to play this last part also.
Law enforcement police officers protect a population of over 300 million Americans? So the obvious question is, why is the government trying to restrict or make certain firearms illegal for private citizens if they can refuse to protect me? Criminals don't obey gun laws. We all know that.
Now again, y'all let me know down in the comment section. Do you agree with that? Do criminals obey gun laws? There's hundreds of firearm laws on the books just in this country. And yet we still see mass tragedies on a semi-regular basis in this country. Some people would even say, you know, more so than back in the day. Again, what does this mean to you personally? So now let's look at another journal off of the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Justice Programs website. Title of this one says, Avoiding Liability for Police Failure to Protect. And again, I just want you to take a second, marinate on this title. What does it mean to you? What does it mean for you and your family, right? Your loved ones, right? From the Police Chief Journal, published in 1989. Annotation says police agencies can avoid liability for failure to protect or failure to prevent crime by becoming familiar with the law and conducting training programs to deal with future contingencies in this area. Is this a form of plausible deniability to you all? What does this mean to you all? Abstract. The courts have never supported claims of failure to protect just because a crime was committed and the victim was injured. So you being injured means nothing to the courts. Thus, law enforcement officers owe no duty to specific individuals injured by crime unless a special relationship has been created between the crime victim and the law enforcement authorities. You know, in prison, what's considered a special relationship? They have most of the prisons in this country whole wings to protect people with SO charges, with charges against women and children. They protect people with domestic violence charges. You dig? All right, so boom, we back to the opinion side, right? Back with y'all favorite website, looking at the thread r/Supreme Court, and this person asks, police no duty to protect. Supreme Court of the United States has ruled police have no duty to protect and understand why that is needed to an extent. But I don't know how they constitutionally reached that decision. My question is, could a legislature pass a constitutionally valued law that required cops to protect, at least in some circumstances? It's a fair question, right? This person said their only duty is to enforce the law. They can't protect where no laws are broken. This person said, is that even true? Legally, constitutionally? Another person says, listening to all these comments about cops not having a duty to protect the public, that it is basically at their discretion, really raises the question as to the merits of having police at all. How do you feel about that? They say maybe an investigative arm, traffic and parking enforcement. I can't think of any other reason for 40% of a city's budget, such as the cops in that town in Texas, being spent on that. So this person right here is speaking on a case that, again, my Italian homie back in the day, he brought this to my attention. And I remember my initial thoughts being, well, you know, you got to be missing something. That can't really be the facts of this case, right? It just doesn't make sense. The cops are here to protect and serve, you know, whether they do that in every instance, you know, there was always, you know, some nuance to that, some gray area to that. But this couldn't be an actual Supreme Court case, right? So this is a case from the lower courts, and we're going to do a little bit more digging into this case in particular. But this person says, this very question was at issue in Castle Rock v. Gonzales, 2005. In this case, the Colorado legislature had passed a law intended to address the consistent lack of adequate police response in cases of domestic violence. They say notably the law stated that police shall enforce restraining orders. Legislative history indicates they meant this to confer an affirmative right to protection for people granted restraining orders and to impose upon the police a duty to provide this protection. They say it's hard to imagine a law more clearly designed to require the police to provide protection in the narrow case of domestic violence restraining orders. But the Supreme Court of the United States falls back on police discretion and rules they have no such duty. So again, what they're explaining here is just one particular instance, an actual court case that went through the lower courts, made it up to the United States Supreme Court, right? And a Supreme Court justice, along with others, came to an agreement that, forget what the lower court said, they don't have to do this. They've been found to lack adequate police response in these particular type of cases. And the wording of their job is such to make you believe that they need to do better at providing adequate police response. Supreme Court said, you know, we're going to disagree with that, right? Says in a 7-2 decision by your boy Antonin Scalia, right? And a concurrence written by Souter. SCOTUS disagreed, overturning the lower court's rulings. The Court of Appeals concluded that this statutory provision, especially taken in conjunction with a statement from its legislative history, and with another statute restricting criminal and civil liability for officers making arrests, established the Colorado legislature's clear intent to alter the fact that the police were not enforcing domestic abuse restraining order, and thus its intent that the recipient of a domestic abuse restraining order have an entitlement to its enforcement. So basically, that's these people right here, right? Look at these smiling faces. That must mean that they have your best interest at heart, right? And like the side of the police cars, probably where you live at, say, they're also here to protect and serve you as a taxpaying citizen, right? We look into a little bit of the background on this last case that we were just getting some information on. Originally, Gonzales v. Castle Rock, Colorado, right?
Jessica,
Let's check this out.
formerly Gonzales, is here to tell her story. Her daughters were abducted by her estranged husband and killed after the police repeatedly refused to enforce her domestic violence restraining order against her.
Here's what happened. Back in
Repeatedly,
1999,
right?
3 little girls aged 10, 8, and 7 were shot to death by their father. And their mother has been trying to sue Castle Rock and its police force for not protecting her daughters. But U.S. cities are immune from most lawsuits, and the Supreme Court will decide whether or not she can sue, in this case, a case that could affect police departments across the country. Sisters Rebecca, Catherine,
There's Catherine.
and Leslie Gonzales were known to their friends as 3 peas in a pod, a fun-loving trio, even though their parents were getting divorced. Their mother, Jessica, said her estranged husband, Simon, had been frightening them, acting erratically.
I went out in the garage and found him, you know, standing on this stool and his neck in the noose, and the children are standing at the door watching this. And I was holding the rope away from his neck, and I made the girls call the police because I couldn't do it myself.
So Jessica got a restraining order to keep Simon away from her and the girls.
Hi.
The order stipulated that he could only be with his daughters on alternate weekends and one prearranged dinner during the week. But just 1 month after the restraining order was issued, on a night when he wasn't supposed to see the girls, Simon loaded his daughters into his pickup truck and drove off.
They had asked me around 4:30 if they could go out and play. And they checked in just about every hour. And so I knew when they didn't check in with me by 5:30, something was wrong. I was afraid. I couldn't believe that he would do that. And so I told the police.
Colorado law requires police to arrest anyone who violates a restraining order, but Jessica says the officers did not seem very concerned.
Because their first
The law
reaction
requires it,
was,
right?
well, he's their father. It's okay for them to be with him. And I said, no, it's not okay.
Instead of sensing danger, the police were treating this as merely a domestic spat.
I practically read the restraining order to them.
And they played this lady like,
Said, well, what if he doesn't?
they played this
bring
lady
you
like
home?
no big deal.
They said, well, you call us back in a couple hours.
Jessica says she read them the part of the order that instructs police to use every reasonable effort to protect the children, to prevent violence. And she told us she begged and pleaded with the police to get her girls. When 10 o'clock passed and the girls still had not returned, Jessica says she called police for the 3rd time, and they told her to wait until midnight before calling again.
So fam, I just want y'all to, if you can, empathize for a minute, right? Think critically. Put yourself in this lady's shoes, or even if possible in these children's shoes, you know. I'm sure a lot of y'all listening can relate to parents, marriages maybe not working out. We may have initially thought that type of thing, you know, things change, you know, people change. I don't know. So again, when you kind of just look at this case, and this is just one case, I'm sure this type of thing happens all the time that we never even hear about, right? But I don't know. How do y'all think a situation like this should have ended?
At 3:20 in the morning,
Let's check it out.
according to the police, Simon Gonzales drove here to what was then the site of the Castle Rock police station. The police say that he got out of his truck and began to shoot into the building, into the police station, with a semi-automatic gun he had bought that evening just after he had picked up the girls. The police returned his fire and they shot Simon dead. And when the cops looked into the cab of his truck, they found the bodies of Rebecca, Catherine, and Leslie. And the autopsy showed that Simon had shot each of his daughters in the head at close range after leaving the amusement park, which meant that he'd driven around with their bodies beside him for several hours.
That's disgusting. You feel me? On both sides, from law enforcement and from the father. So we're gonna listen to a little bit more of this lady speak on what she went through, as what she describes being a victim of police negligence, right?
Was in a marriage for 11 years, and it was extremely abusive emotionally and psychologically, not physically. And that needs to be made clear. Abuse does not always come in the physical form, which promoted me into finding a restraining order that obviously does not serve us. We were pretty desperate at that time, and we took the chance in applying for that. But in doing that, we set forth our abusers' anger, and we take away their control in a way, and it just puts it into motion where it eventually blows up. And that is where police do not enforce and they do not respect the holder of a restraining order. And therefore it makes it very dangerous and ultimately lethal for women and children to not have those enforced. I had tracked Simon for the 6 months that I was
Do you agree with that?
separated from him, and he had 5 contacts with the police in a 6-month period of time. Most of us don't have 5 contacts in a lifetime, and yet they ignored my 8 phone calls in 10 hours pertaining to this restraining order. They never bothered to respond. It took them 2 hours to come to my home in the initial phone call. And again, they turned the blind eye and refused to even look for him. At 8:30 at night, he finally phoned me from Illich Gardens after buying a gun at 8 o'clock. And when I called the Castle Rock police to inform them, they said, "That's out of our jurisdiction." I said to them, "You need to put out an APB." They did not even know how to put out an APB.
Plausible deniability.
Instead, the officer that I went in to speak with went to lunch for 2 hours.
I think these last points that she makes right here, this is kind of just the most impactful thing that I may show you. And again, I just want you to take a minute and marinate on this. Take these words in.
I have been
How does
through
it
the
make you
court
feel?
system and have been told that officers do not have to enforce. There is nothing to make them. They are under immunity. The government grants them immunity. So what are we paying them tax dollars for? Needless to say,
Word.
the whole evening went by, and every 2 hours I was told to wait and call back. Wait and call back. Had they just told me they weren't going to do anything, I could have at least gathered my own posse and went looking for my children instead of waiting. It was just an explosion waiting to happen. It was the worst day of my entire life. That was on June 22nd of 1999. My 7th year anniversary just recently passed. By 3:30 the next morning on the 23rd, I heard from Simon's girlfriend that the police, after a shootout with Simon and ultimately killing him, had found my 3 dead daughters in the back of the cab of his truck. And that's how I found out that my children were murdered.
Again, if that doesn't kind of make you just rethink our current society and some of the different tragic events that we've heard of just recently, just in the last, couple of years. I honestly don't know what will. I honestly, don't even know what type of person you are. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just deep. And I think this is something that is so important because it affects anyone with loved ones that may not be able to defend themselves, right? And again, more specifically, women and children. Just right here in the context of domestic violence, which is something that it can happen both ways. I'm sure there's plenty of instances that, again, we don't hear about at all that happen from the woman in a relationship against the man. And just because of, the societal standards, you don't hear about it. So I also want to bring up something else that she touched on in that last video we just watched. Qualified immunity, right? It says qualified immunity is a type of legal immunity that protects a government official from lawsuits alleging that the official violated a plaintiff's rights, only allowing suits where officials violated a clearly established statutory or constitutional right. It's from Cornell University, right? So what does that mean in the context of something like a restraining order? Where does that leave you with an understanding of your Second Amendment right? What does this painted on the side of this vehicle actually mean? Who are they talking about? Why are there documents with titles like this? When you think of LEO training, law enforcement officer training, right? How much of their training budget goes into things like this, do you think?
Immunity is a judge-made doctrine that gives prosecutors near absolute immunity from lawsuits. This means prosecutors cannot be sued for any actions related to their job as a prosecutor. For example, prosecutors can't even be sued for faking evidence. There's only one exception. Prosecutors can be sued if their actions were not connected to their actual job, like when they act like an investigator. However, this exception is almost never applied. In the very few cases where courts do not grant prosecutorial immunity, prosecutors also get qualified immunity. This means victims have to show that the prosecutor's behavior violated clearly established law before they will receive their day in court. Prosecutorial immunity is a judge-made that gives prosecutors.
So I just want y'all to, again, take into account, right? Terms like the qualified immunity. It's like an almost blanket coverage for people in positions of power. And again, in the context of, plausible deniability, right? What does that really mean about the world that you live in? The world you live in, you and your family members, right? And then, we look into the video we just watched about prosecutorial immunity, right? So even the prosecutors, same thing. They can go into court, they swear an oath, they go into court and they can lie, they can cheat, as long as they're not caught in, a very narrow set of loopholes. There's no repercussions for them, right? But it's not like that when you watch TV and movies and things like that. The good guys tend to win in a lot of the shows, a lot of the media we consume. Why do you think they make so many shows and movies like that? Does that give you a false sense of security? Do things like the DARE program give kids a false sense of security? It's almost like, they're playing word games. They're, it's like semantics, right? We read this, it says, in the United States, qualified immunity is a legal principle of federal constitutional law that grants government officials performing discretionary or optional functions immunity from lawsuits for damages unless the plaintiff shows that the official violated clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. Again, plausible deniability. Somebody in law enforcement does something and then they're investigated by another branch of of government or the judicial system itself, right? And it says, well, you didn't know, so we're not going to hold you accountable. So again, I'm going to ask each of you watching that's made it to this point, how many of you work a job, right, where, man, you can come in late, you can come in and make mistakes. You don't even have people's life in your hands, right? And you can make consistent mistakes, or let's say serious mistakes. You can make a mistake on your job that, again, leads to a loss of life and not be held fully accountable, right? I also want you to just peep how them being held accountable is based on clearly established constitutional rights. So again, a lot of this, you being able, first of all, you have to be able to find an attorney that's willing to go up against any branch of government. That's hard enough. That's a big enough obstacle that I think a lot of people don't think of when they're speaking on their rights. So let's say you do have an attorney that's willing to do what we would call the right thing. The uphill battle for that attorney, no matter how good of an attorney they are, is going to be arguing against the established court dispositions. If we never let anybody up to the Supreme Court level win a case that says, hey, we were wrong with this whole entire doctrine, the odds are extremely low that in the future you're going to be able to win a case of a similar nature. So I know we're getting kind of long with this video. I just wanted to read this one last part. It says the United States Supreme Court first introduced the qualified immunity doctrine in Pearson versus Ray, 1967, a case litigated during the height of the civil rights movement. It is stated to have been originally introduced with the rationale of protecting law enforcement officials from frivolous lawsuits and financial liability in cases where they acted in good faith in unclear legal situations. Starting around 2005, courts increasingly applied the doctrine to cases involving the use of excessive or deadly force by police, leading to widespread criticism that it has become a nearly fail-safe tool to let police brutality go unpunished and deny victims their constitutional rights. So what it seems like the idea behind this doctrine is that there were so many people just randomly bringing bogus lawsuits against law enforcement that were supposedly doing the right thing back in this time period, that, hey man, we had to come up with this doctrine and just shut all of that down. We're not going to look at nuance, right? That's the court's position. I don't know, man. It seems, this seems to be the type of thing that you would do as a government that's, attempting to take advantage. So right here, we're looking at a separate article from this, I believe, NBC affiliate, Charlotte, North Carolina, right? And they're going to give us maybe a conflicting opinion to what we've seen so far. And they say every day the public is learning new information about the mass tragedy at an elementary school in Texas. Says some are questioning the decisions of law enforcement on the scene and their obligations while on the job. One claim shared by many on social media cites several U.S. Supreme Court cases regarding state officers' conduct. They're saying what a lot of people have posted is that now's a good time to remind folks that Supreme Court has ruled in multiple cases that the police/fed agencies have no duty to protect the public, right? And I just want you to see how, certain news agencies on both sides of the political aisle, even though they supposedly will disagree with each other, they'll attempt to lead you to the same conclusion. And kind of my ultimate point here is for you to take all the information in totality, right? And come to your own conclusion. But these people here are saying the question, do law enforcement officers have an obligation to protect the community? And before they get to the answer, they give you their sources. You're supposed to take these sources as legitimate, right? Boom, Stanford Law School, right? Union County Sheriff's Office. This is from the Supreme Court ruling, right? DeShaney versus Winnebago. So their answer, boom, true. They fact checked it for us. So I guess everything that I brought to you so far, it's been debunked based on this article right here. It says, yes, law enforcement officers have an obligation to protect the community. What we found in DeShaney versus Winnebago, a mother sued her local Department of Social Services, alleging they failed to protect her son from his abusive father despite repeated complaints. In that case, the Supreme Court said that police departments and local governments don't owe duties to protect particular individuals. Said they owe a duty to the public to protect. But that means that as a community, we have a right for the police to protect us. Do you see how right here in the middle of this article, it says the court's decision didn't rule on the conduct of the officers, but rather on what consequences officers of the state may face. As a general matter, those individuals cannot sue for compensation, and their families can't sue for compensation. That's different from saying that police departments don't have a duty to protect people. The Supreme Court did not say that police departments lacked any duty to protect people. Again, my argument to you all is news outlets at times will play word games with you. Lieutenant James May from the sheriff's office, he said each law enforcement officer takes an oath to protect the public from serious harm or death. They put their hand, quote, they put their hand on the Bible, capital B, and they swear that they're going to live up to an oath, May said. They agreed to sign on and uphold, and we take that oath very seriously. What do you all think Ms. Gonzales would have to say about that? But again, it's my job to give you all not just one opinion on the matter.
Wants to know why it took law enforcement more than an hour to put an end to the deadly school shooting in Uvalde, Texas. As investigators review the emergency response, claims are popping up online about law enforcement conduct.
Some posts are citing a Supreme Court case to suggest officers do not have a duty to protect the public. Fred Shropshire took a closer look at the case to verify.
So let's verify. Do law enforcement officers have an obligation to protect the community? Our sources: David Skolansky, a professor at Stanford Law School, Lieutenant James May with the Union County Sheriff's Office, and the Supreme Court case DeShaney versus Winnebago. In the DeShaney versus Winnebago case, a mother sued her local Department of Social Services, alleging they failed to protect her son from his abusive father despite repeated complaints.
The Supreme Court said that police departments and local governments don't owe duties to protect two particular individuals. They owe a duty to the public to protect. But that means that as a community, we have a right for the police to protect us.
Skolansky says the court's decision didn't rule on the conduct of officers, but rather what consequences officers may face.
As a general matter, those individuals cannot sue for compensation, and their families can't sue for compensation. That's different from saying that police departments don't have a duty to protect people. The Supreme Court did not say that police departments lack any duty to protect people.
Lieutenant J.
Again, I want you to really think about what we just read, what you just heard, and what they actually mean by that. Because they're letting you know, without letting you know, the society that you actually live in. And that sometimes different people, whether in the general public or those that govern the general public, can and will say things that they don't mean. There's times that officials may use something that we now know is called plausible deniability to remove themselves from being held accountable in situations where the society at large would say somebody needs to be held accountable here. And I think more specifically, when we're talking about situations involving loss of life, loss of young life, right? Fam, we got to stop making excuses. I've asked y'all before, how long would you stay with somebody who you're in a relationship with this person, right? And you catch them in a lie, you catch them cheating. You catch them more than once. You catch them cheating with your best friend and a family member of yours. And they say, okay, let's sit down. Let's talk. Let's fix this, right? or you have to beg them to fix it. Kind of like going to court, right? And then going up to a higher court, and a higher court, and a higher court. And you finally get them to sit down and actually discuss what they did with you as an adult. And they just want to sit there and play word games with you. They want to play semantics with you. They want to keep making straw man arguments, right? Changing the subject, that type of thing. Finding loopholes for why the wrong thing that they did should be excused. So the next time that you find yourself getting pulled over, whether in the right or in the wrong, the next time that you may be having issues with a significant other, just any scenario where law enforcement may end up getting involved, you have a duty to protect yourself and your loved ones. That's what's important. You only get one life here, right? So, think deeply, be proactive, be vigilant. Don't just go looking for trouble, right? But there's people, I'm sure anybody listening to this, there's somebody somewhere that's depending on you, that at some point in time will need you to protect them. And especially the way that things look just today in this world that we in. So I think that's going to be it for this episode, man. I appreciate y'all yet again. If you're new here, hopefully you'll subscribe. We got more content similar to this and just completely different content coming to you soon. Try to cover a little bit of everything, I'm definitely planning on making some other videos that maybe aren't as serious as this one right here, but this is something, again, it's kind of, God put it on my heart to kind of get this out today. And I did a lot of thinking on the way to go about this. And trust me, it's a lot more that I wanted to add to this. But ultimately, I want you all to come to your own conclusions and to be there for the people that you care about. So yeah, we're going to be back with another video. We're going to be back with episode 8 real soon. I appreciate y'all checking me out. I appreciate everybody who's been rocking with me. If you like the content, man, go ahead and like the content, you dig?